It is Thursday, October 26th, 2023. Welcome to Axiom News Live, where we engage strengths to catalyze change, where we begin with what's strong rather than what's wrong, and pay attention to people whose real work in the world is creating the future we want to inhabit here and now. Today, my guest is Larry Berger, who some of you will know from our time together at Cultivating Community. Larry has just published The Politics of Attention and the Promise of Mindfulness. And I think that our time together will be very interesting in that we have met Larry before, and the idea of what we pay attention to is very much fundamental to what this show is all about. We can change the world in which we live and the way we experience life by the way and how and to whom we pay attention. So with that, I'd like to invite Larry, our single guest today. We did have a second guest lined up, but part of the fun and the creative work of a live show is we see what happens and roll with the punches. So I'm also coming in hot from a long drive, and we had all kinds of fun tech issues in the green room. So our generative energy is high and our acuity is running pretty well. So with that, Larry, thank you very much for joining us today. I'm looking forward to our conversation about the power of attention in our lives.
Excellent. Great to be here, Peter.
Right on. So one of the things I like to do, Larry, is just see if we can recount or even remember how it was that we came to know each other. One of our premises here is that we pay attention to people who we've become connected to and who we know, so that we're not just bringing in folks who we don't have some relationship with. So we do have some relationship. Can you remember at all how it is that we came to know?
I mean, I've been fortunate to be able to attend your bi-weekly meetings on Fridays, and it's a big inspiration, for what I do. I mean, every time is valuable. I mean, How can that happen? Why doesn't the world understand that this happens when people get together and are just open to one another in this way? It's miraculous. It's just the only way to think about it. And people walk away saying they feel seen and heard. And guess who's writing about that? David Brooks, the New York Times columnist, just has a book on being seen and heard. He just published an article a few days ago on the importance of attention, to give your gift of attention. That gift of attention is something the world needs. And my book is about that. And it goes into the question of, what is this gift of attention anyway? What is attention? And my premise, I'm drawing on the work of Martin Heidegger. This book is published as part of what's called the New Heidegger Research Series. And for Heidegger, he's explicit about it. Attention is how we connect to what he calls being, which is, one way to think about it is it's the higher power that unites this cosmos. Okay? And let's talk about energy. We're surrounded by energy. Okay, but guess what? We live in those fields. We're here. Our presence is in those fields, and we experience an energy. And people talk about an inner energy. The physicists miss it because they throw the humans out and they just look at the rest of the world. So they talk about energy fields as being fundamental, and some of them say that light is the way to look at the universe, not matter. Okay, because it's energy fields that create the mass that we see. Okay, so the idea is that we're in touch with the fundamental energy ourselves, and by way of attention. In fact, attention can be viewed as sort of an offspring. I mean, people talk about a divine spark, but we are able to access this higher power, which is what mindfulness is about, of course. That's the tradition. The tradition, it comes from practicing yoga, which is union with the divine. It comes from Eastern, it's in the Western spiritual tradition, that's everywhere. But people today, talking about spirituality or the divine, that's a dirty word. You have to, you can't be real. But guess what? This is an academic book. Okay, I have endorsements. If you look on the back, one of those is a professor at Swarthmore, a political science professor at Swarthmore. The last name of Berger, not a relative, who he's not viewed as a spiritual loony, and the other ones are know Heidegger very well. But these are top people in the Heidegger world. Now he's a controversial figure, but this is the reason I went to Heidegger was because of my interest in attention from this practice mindfulness. Like I've been practicing mindfulness over 50 years. And I came to the conclusion that attention is the essence of mindfulness. And I started to write about it. And lo and behold, I came to Heidegger and I said, because it was very big back in the 80s and postmodernism was big then. So I start reading Being in Time. I say, oh my God, this is about attention. And so I hitched my horse to that wagon and I've been on it ever since. And it's recognized by the Heidegger community and others as a valid work. As a matter of fact, I'm on the way to getting 6 book reviews in academic journals. Okay, so this book is being recognized as credible by an academic community. So now we can talk about what attention is. It's something, we're spiritual beings. Attention is the very core of our being in the world, our presence in the world. As a matter of fact, I do this thing called focusing therapy, which I mention virtually every time. I've been doing focusing therapy for something like 15 years. And my last session just a couple days ago, he asked me, Larry, what's the most important thing about your, but be in your body, So I said to myself, well, I'm not going to just say what comes to the top of my head. I'm going to get in my body and listen to what comes. And this is what we're about, listening to what comes to us. And what came was attention is where we are in the present moment. It's where we exist. It's where we are. And R is this being, R is connected to Heidegger's being work. But anyway, it's our essence. Attention is in movement, and it's where we are at any moment, but we're unaware of that movement. And it's the rock bottom what makes us tick. Everything else depends on it. If my attention is somewhere else, if I go drift off, they're going to say, Larry, where are you? Larry, you're supposed to be present here you're live here on Axiom News. And now I'm drifting off and thinking, oh God, I got to be somewhere.
Well, you mentioned that in the book that if you're supposed to, or if you've agreed to be paying attention to someone, well, even if you haven't, if we're with someone and we do drift and wander, they'll know it. They'll sense that we're not paying attention to them and the relationship, like intuitively know it, and that could change the way they are present to themselves, even, right? So I know if at the dinner table I feel like my partner is not quite paying attention, I may or may not share that insight that's really burning inside me from my experience during the day. So we feel this sense of disconnection almost instantly when it's not there. And of course, that's only possible in contrast to knowing what it is to be seen and heard fully by another.
Yeah, people can pick that up, and it's essential for human relations. And in fact, what I argue in the book is that we have to change our whole worldview to accommodate this phenomenon of attention, because it doesn't work. It's a puzzle. The psychologists, every time they talk about attention, they say, well, gee, William James says everyone knows what it is, but guess what? We don't. Basically, they're basically saying we don't. And what you need, that worldview assumes that the world is physical. That's the dominant assumption. The world's just physical, and then life just sort of happened. Well, that view is crazy. Let's say that view is just bizarre.
So rather than physical, you're suggesting it's energetic.
Well, it's
relational. Okay.
A relational ontology. That's the word I'm using. But we are what we are.
Okay, so I wouldn't mind if we just pause on that word on ontology, because I think in academic circles I hear words like epistemology, ontology. What does ontology mean? So we can just translate a little bit for those of us who are not in academic circles.
No, I appreciate that. It's just who we are in the core of our being.
Okay,
that's one way to put it. I'm saying attention is at the very core of our being. Okay, and relational means that this attention is beyond just what an individual is. You know, the scientists say it's just this brain process, and I critique one of these books that says it's just a higher order brain process. No, it's greater than any individual body because it connects us to others. It connects. If we aren't paying attention to the other, then we're not connected. And I just wanted to back up a little bit. You say people sense it, but there's a subtlety to that. People sense we're not paying attention. The subtlety is, suppose you're absorbed and you are not present yourself as you're speaking. You're absorbed. You're thinking.
Absolutely. Right. So you can speak from an absent self, can't you?
Yeah, you can.
Right. That's pretty dissociative. Like some people would think that was a mental illness.
We're totally dissociative right there because we're not in touch with this, but we're out of our bodies. We're, so that's this. You talk about the state of attention. We are typically absorbed. Where emotion drives us, and this is a long philosophical history. People arguing that emotion, the reason is and ought to be the slave of the passions. That's Hume, and it's right. Emotion is extremely powerful, and we just get stuck in. It's because we seek meaning. We're meaning-seeking beings, and we want things out of life. And when things are going on, we're absorbed by this emotional feeling, and we're just we typically are dissociate. Although I think men are particularly bad about that.
So you're saying we're typically dissociative?
Yeah. Well, because attention is what unifies us. It's
that's powerful. Attention is what unifies us.
Yeah, attention has the power to unify, but we have to practice mindfulness because we come in touch with our bodies. I had a class yesterday, and there's a student in the class who just so happens there was a flyer sent around my college at Marist saying we have mindfulness here with a monk, for students, and it turns out one of my students was in the article. So I asked her, because we were talking about free will, and I asked Kristen, you have experience with mindfulness. What do you see about mindfulness that could help us with the argument for free will? Because I was arguing, you need self-awareness. You need to be aware of the forces that are impinging on you in order to have free will. And she says, yeah, well, that's right, because everybody knows that you become aware of yourself. You become aware of yourself when you practice mindfulness. So we walk around being unaware of all the feelings that are going on within us. And I'll tell you, when I started practicing, I was 19 years old. I remember I was on the campus of Temple University, and I was walking along the street. I just was reading Zen. I was doing Zen Buddhism, and I was practicing being present. Like, no, I'm becoming aware of my insecurity. I'm an insecure guy. I didn't know that. So I think most of the time, without this gift, it's why we're here. Heidegger says we're here to be mindful because we open up a space for the other to enter in, and we open up a space for this higher power to show itself. Okay? And this just reminds me, Martin Buber is one of my favorite philosophers. I don't know if you ever have read any Buber, but
I haven't read any Buber or much Heidegger, actually.
Well, some phenomenology, that's for sure. But,
I'm pretty keen on the notion of phenomenology, that's for sure. Yeah.
So Buber says, and this is right up your alley because he's describing community, and he has this I-thou relationship, where usually we objectify people, we treat them as it's the I-it, which I would call this passive attention. As we just go about doing that, just objectifying everything to fit our needs. But in the I-thou, we're present to one another. And he says the community is like a wheel with hubs. Okay, so you have a wheel, and you got this center, and you have the hub. Okay, each of the hubs is an I-thou relationship. What's at the center? The divine. That's what makes a robust community. That we're all connected to this power that courses through us.
So
It's
in the I thou dynamic, then, where we are paying attention to one another, this is the point at which we access the divine.
yeah. I mean, that's true. For Buber, that's right. That we are accessing the divine in that relationship. But of course, Levinas is a wonderful philosopher too, who's all about the face of the other. Of course, his family was killed in the Holocaust, and he went. So he was ethics was his high calling, but it was all about the face of the other. That we have to recognize the infinite in the face of the other, and recognize and bow down to it. There was a debate between two Jewish thinkers, a debate because Buber has this sort of equal relationship between the two. That we're together, we're present to one another, we bond, and we open up to the divine. But no, Levinas says, no, you have to cower. You have to recognize the divinity in the other person. So they're saying the same thing in a way. But that was a big point of debate.
Well, and recognizing the divinity in the other, like, so one of the things that that's been on my mind lately is that I'm very interested in occupying that space between the very concrete and practical and some of the sort of conceptual view of things. So, for example, if we have this edict to love one another. Okay, well, how exactly does that work? And same when you say to see or recognize the divine in the other. That sounds like a really tall order, right? So, the pathways to participation, the pathway to having that experience is a question for me. If we invite somebody off the street and say, recognize the divine in me, or I recognize the divine in you, aren't we likely to say, what the heck are you talking about? So what, and this is one of the things I find in the way we gather and cultivating community, there are now structures or ways to be with one another that enable that access without having to go to the mountain or see a sage or develop even a personal practice before we get to that. But is it possible that simply being aware of the possibility or being accepting that the divine also exists in the person in front of me, that to be
Yeah,
open to receiving and seeing it is simply the place to start? Like, being open to that aim is different than necessarily moving on the will to recognize it.
well, Peter, we're going to have something that we differ about here. Else, people are going to get tuned out because I just everything you said is exactly where I'm going. It's about
Right.
I have to open
Absolutely.
up.
Yep.
You see, and this idea of passivity. It's very big in Heidegger. That all we can do is open up and be present. Because attention, again, it's our core. And if it's going its way and we're not present to it, then all bets are off. Because that movement, which is often driven by emotions, is if you're out of touch with it, you're not aware of why you're doing things. You're thinking things. You're angry at somebody for a reason that hasn't been explored. That's what this focusing therapy. You focus on your body and you get directly in touch with those feelings. So you go deeper, get insight into those feelings. But yeah, when I say, and when Levinas says that, he says he's all about attention too. At the very end of his book, I mean, it's a very difficult, amazing book. But at the end, he says it's attending to the face of the other is what we need. And because when you give your attention to somebody, that's the ultimate act of respect. And I think you've said this. So
well, it's circulating in some of our conversations in circles that you could define love as the combination of attention and time.
Yeah, and that's who are the people? It's Simone Weil. Are you familiar with her?
I'm not. No.
Attention is prayer. She's beautiful like that. There are other people. Iris Murdoch talks about love and attention. So you're right in tune with these other figures, but you can't do it and you can't be present for a reason. This is I'm saying when I'm saying attention mindfulness is intrinsically valuable for its own sake. It means you can't. People are saying, "Oh, it's going to help me do the job better. It's going to help me win lovers or
Well, I
whatever."
would argue that it does create the it provides us access or a pathway to um, the fullest possible experience of life.
Yeah,
So there is some, um, I'm with you on it. It has its intrinsic value, and part of its intrinsic value is that I think you talk about this in the book, or you write about it in the book, that by paying attention to one another, we actually, to some degree, I'll say it clumsily, Larry, and then you can refine the edges off it. But there's this idea that we actually create ourselves in relationship, and the greater degree to which we can with which we can pay attention to others and another is the degree to which we create ourselves, but also um, invite a mutual arising. So as
yeah.
we unfold and become, while being present to another and having them being present to us, and that doesn't not it's not necessarily a bilateral thing. It can be a multilateral thing. These things, I think, you can actually
Yeah.
presence a group. You can presence a phenomenon. You can presence one person or even two at the same time. Um,
Well, this is
that
what you.
creates
I
that
mean, this
creates
is.
this.
I'm
That's
just
how
saying the
we.
beauty of what you do. I mean, I have to say I'm your biggest fan out here, saying you're putting this in place in the real world for sure. And yeah, but I would just, I'm interrupting now, but when you say we create ourselves, that's a little strong because it's more like we're present. We try to be here. We're encouraged. We're given reasons why we should be. But then what happens is I can't say I've acted in any way. I come about myself. The I shows itself. This new self or this new aspect of myself arises in this meeting with the other. And I'm a help because I know the other's doing the same thing. That's the important thing. When I'm face to face, when my attention's on that person and that person is trying to be present and we know we're both supposed to be present, that helps a lot. And Gurjeet is I don't know if you know Gurjeet.
I
Uh,
don't. I
uh,
am I am a hardcore phenomenological practitioner, Larry. Like, I get myself into things, and then I can find a book like yours that we shared earlier. It is written for an academic audience and with academics in mind, with the view to give some of these practices and approaches some academic legitimacy and to back them up.
yeah,
So I can manage most of the vocabulary, but I can also see the meaning in what you're sharing and how you parse and split things, and getting a very refined idea about how these work. Because what I've experienced in life um, enables what you're writing to resonate. So I see and feel the truth in what you're writing. So for me, um, the the conceptual work that you've done aligns with the practical work that I've had the experience of. So what you're doing is explaining to me, in more refined detail, actually, things that I've experienced in this relational presencing field.
yeah, and the idea is I was pointing to Gurdjieff, who's not an academic, who's a mystic, a
Right.
Russian mystic, who's very popular in certain circles. He says you can't do the work. It's the Gurdjieff work, and it's work with attention, and that's how I came to my idea of attention. I have a friend who's still very Gurdjieff oriented. He says, "Larry, you just ripping up Gurdjieff here. What you doing?" But Gurdjieff says you can't do it alone. It has to be in community.
That is so
Yeah,
important.
yeah.
So important. It is an active relationship.
Oh,
That's the currency. That's the current. That's what brings things to life.
yeah, and I just need that presence of the other person, uh, you know, and recognizing that's why we're here. I'm here to listen to that person, and it's a beautiful thing because it's so hard. Even when I talk about this all the time in the groups. I say, gee, I think I got a little better at listening today. I've only been trying it for like 50 years.
Well, that's the thing with
That's
the
good at
practice. I don't think you get it done quickly, you know. And what I find is that there is something in it for the person who's so in our cultivating community, the work that you talked about on the Fridays is that we take turns, each person in a small group of three, and there is something magic about that number as well. We have two ears and one mouth because probably it's harder to listen than it is to speak. Um,
it. It's really easy to speak. Wow, not
so
a
two
problem.
listeners to one speaker, you know. There is something very powerful. I've had the experience more than once, and I won't say all the time. Well, maybe it's just a degree of this experience where I can be um, present to another, and because they are in our practice in a place where they are assured they will not be invaded or evaded by my commentary, questions, relations, whatever. I'm just simply going to be quiet and do the best I can to be present to them and what I'm sensing is arising in them and through them is being expressed. And like you said, I might find that some part of my body uh, lands the response. And so if I'm aware, then I can sort of understand what that might mean too. But in that experience, it can happen that something that a person has shared may strike me as the piece of wisdom I've been looking for, but didn't know I was looking for it. Or they might express some energy or perhaps an ethos or some character trait that has lied dormant in me that is then animated and enlivened by them. So suddenly some part of me that was quiet or dormant or unseen is suddenly present in me. So I'm having a resonant response to the person who I'm paying attention to. And so when I say, you know, create ourselves or we create each other in this process, maybe it's co-create because I don't think I've created myself, but I'm in the process of unfolding. And if I want to be fully expressed and have a full experience of who I am in relationship to the world, being present with another person can quite often animate something in me that I wasn't aware was there. And by this means I become more whole, but I also come in contact with, as you said, the divine. I come in contact with and have an experience and am changed by something greater than I am by myself by being present and paying attention to someone else.
Yeah, that's beautiful said, Peter. And it really brings me. I really haven't gotten to the main idea of the book, believe it or not. I mean, because I say attention is my presence. Okay, but what does that mean? Well, you talk about you brought it up in your comments. I mean, the idea is that attention brings our bodies, and so our bodies are rich vehicles. And as you talk about bodily resonance, well, it brings that all those capacities, whatever I become, and Heidegger calls it my factical being, but whatever I bring to my relationship, it brings my I become formed in the way that
That's it.
the bodily resources, that's the me that comes out in
Right.
relation to the other person. So it's this bodily stuff that's sensing but it's also directing my attention in various ways. You see, and that's the framework. I don't know if you got the chapter two. It's the most important chapter because it has all these triangles and diagrams. That's really
Yes, I flip back and forth from the triangles and watch how each point in the triangle is overlaid with a new meaning as we
I
go.
know it's hard. It took me 6 months. I felt that was a discovery when I put the language in there. I had the other part, but putting language in, it opened things up. And I think I barely scratched the surface about that. But the key idea is that my bodily being is brought into relation in various configurations. You see various aspects of me. You say some things were dormant, they were brought out. So and this Evan Thompson has a similar idea. I don't know if you ever heard of Evan Thompson. He's an important philosopher. Uh, he's created this school called inactivist thought, which is really uh, it's going against cognitive science, the usual science stuff that misses so much about human beings. So inactivism something people should be aware of if they want to really explore how these ideas are developing. They're meaning-seeking beings. But he has this idea of that's what the self is. It's just changing from moment to moment as our attention moves. And attention is the center. It's what we're centered on. It's where it can be in our body, it can be on the person, but there can be stuff in the body that's driving how the attention is going if we're passive. But otherwise, when we're active, no, we're just present as full as we can be. That's the idea. Is that when we're mindful, when we're really trying to be as fully present as we can, then more of the self is brought forward and we're more whole. And that's what we want to be. We want to be whole when we meet the other person. We want to bring everything we can to feel for that person. There's a lot of talk about empathy in the phenomenology, but empathy is just feeling for the person directly, sharing that pain and the pain in my life, and you have to be really present and hear them deeply, and see. I'm just repeating. I can't beat you in this game, Peter. I'll just keep.
I think we're mutually arising, or mutually forming, or reforming. I think, Larry, which is part of the fun of it. Well, a couple of things are coming up, and we'll take just a short break in a sec. But I don't know why I'm thinking about this, but I was sailing a couple of years ago with my two daughters, of course, who I have a deep affection and love for, and some things went wrong with the boat, and so there was this feeling of potential panic. And I remember that the first words out of my mouth were, well, it was "don't panic," and then it was "pay attention." Pay attention. And I know that you brought up in some of our circles, and we hear now polycrisis, metacrisis, these sort of this sort of language, and I've also seen so many times in these triadic conversations that we host that people who have those experiences for their first time, the report out is so very often, I no longer feel lonely or isolated.
So beautiful.
And the sense of co-regulation, the sense of being calm, and this to me has something to do with what you've said about the access to the divine and the forming and reforming of ourselves and the flow of energy and an understanding of those dynamics. And these to me all have very practical considerations. If we are each unfolding into the world and we come into a relationship with one another, and then there's mutual arising that comes from that, then this will manifest itself in the way the world functions. And if we are lonely and isolated and panicked and facing a meta crisis, I just wonder if being present to one another and paying attention may not only be the way to prevent a crisis, but if there is the crisis to face, this is probably the most life-giving way to do it.
Well, that's why my book's called The Politics of Attention. We need these corrupt politicians grab our attention any way they can, and because they have so much trouble getting it, and we have to keep the power ourselves, and because the game's over now. Okay, before it didn't matter. Now it matters big time because the world crisis just keeps getting worse. And we're done.
Well, with that, why don't we take a break there and invite people to Cultivating Community, which I think is a space where you and I probably met. And in 60 seconds, we'll come back and explore. You've got the word politics as the second word in the title of your book, so it might be interesting to sort of explore the direct implications of paying attention and present to one another for the way we are in the world and the world that we inhabit. So with that, we'll take a short break and we'll come back and explore some more.
If you would like to experience genuine connection with others, being heard, patience, levity and laughter, warmth, light, smiles, new, deepening, and healing relationships, then cultivate community with us. Coined by participants as a fortnightly feast for the soul, These 90-minute gatherings hosted by Axiom News offer a weaving of small group dialogue led by carefully crafted questions, followed by light, whole group reflection. Each dialogue round deepens connection and enlivens possibility between and amongst those who participate. All are welcome. Learn more and RSVP for our next gathering by visiting the Events tab in A New Commons, our sister initiative in Mighty Networks, at anewcommons.mn.co/events.
All right. I noticed you might have met Rachel Hindry at Cultivating Community too, Larry, but she's just asked the question in the chat: how is relational attention connected to or different from action or understanding how to act within a situation? So she's got quite a few big concepts in there. So how is relational attention connected to or different from action? Maybe we begin there. Any reflections on that statement, Larry?
So that's exactly what this hermeneutical circle this framework I was telling you about in chapter 2. And
The one with all the triangles in it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the idea is simple, and this is a widely recognized phenomenon that in psychology there are these sort of reciprocal relationships or circles or cycles. And the idea is that attention is how we explore the world. It's our presence, and we see something.
I love that. Attention is how we explore the world. Yeah.
It's how we explore ourselves. We can feel a pain in our body. Our attention's drawn there, or I'm looking at your face now and taking all this in. And my understanding changes right along with it. So my understanding of how to act that's the bodily side. So that's stored in various ways in my body. So I take that information in, whatever it is, and it changes the way I understand my situation, perhaps. But then the circle is that the understanding guides attention. In other words, where does attention go? Well, it goes where it's needed. So my attention goes to what's more important. There might be a threat over there. Where my attention immediately goes, because I have these background processes that are monitoring my situation. Okay. But the circle is how I act, or my understanding of how to act in a situation. That determines what's important and where my attention goes. And my attention finds something, and then it revises. Like I realize, I really should be talking about something else now. Something comes to me because of what I see, and I shift my attention somewhere else. So that's the basic idea. And these cycles are well recognized. They've been, people have recognized this idea for a long time. But the key thing is attention is how we gain access to the world to find out what we should do, and the better the quality of our attention. That's the key thing. The deeper we can go deeper, we can pick up things about people, ourselves. This is the promise of mindfulness: is that we can be more present and understand our situations better. And then,
so I think there's something in that about you also write about direct and proximate experience. So I think there's another phenomenon to be concerned with, and that is that things from far away that we have that may or may not be directly affecting us occupy our attention, and to some degree we can even become absent to our current and present proximate circumstances because our attention has been drawn to these other circumstances. So I can imagine some folks saying, okay, well, how does paying attention serve me in coming to an understanding or a sensing about how I should or how I might act or wish to act if the thing I'm concerned with is so far away? So there's there's got to be something around understanding the field to which we're paying attention and to what degree we have direct experience or agency with that. So for me, watching the evening news is going to be, I can pay attention to that, But will I find any meaningful agency in a response that I can move to in that? Whereas if I am clear and present with people before me, these are relationships in which any motion will likely create a new motion or a response. Have you any thoughts about that? Like, what roles does the proximity have to do with whether or not paying attention is a useful thing?
Well, we're always in our body. Okay, now
And that's
I
pretty hard to avoid. Like this,
yeah,
there's,
yeah,
we hear about out of body, but for the most part, we're in it.
yeah, exactly. Yeah,
It's ever present.
yeah. So I do bring up this idea that we're talking with a group of friends, but yet my mind is elsewhere. I think maybe that's what I use that as an example of not being present. And Heidegger talks about this, that I'm with a bunch of friends, but actually I'm worried about my wife, that she's spending a lot of money or doing something I'm not
Sure,
happy
sure.
about. So that's where my mind really is. But yeah, for that, you see, we have various modes of being in the world, some of
Okay.
which have to do with whatever's present to us, some of which we engage with our body, but it's always by way of our bodily capacity. So I don't
Right.
really make much of that distinction. It's
Okay.
what's really more important is to be present, period, to be in your body. Because when you're thinking about that far away thing, you're still in your body.
Right.
And you can think about that thing, but be whole. And then and more of your stuff will be brought to the fore in dealing with that problem of your wife spending money you don't have. Okay. So it's really about a way of being in all situations, because we're miraculous beings with many capacities and ways to engage the world. All these various sensibilities, emotions. We can be very upset. Well, that's something we can pay attention directly to. And since this is what this focusing therapy is, and I'll just tell you a story that when I first started with this person, I've been doing it for 15 years. And when I first started paying attention to the idea is you actually sense your chest and you say, what's between me and feeling fine? And you access feelings. Now, you might have noticed, I'm like an intellectual that's lost in his head. He's just I'm an out of touch guy. Okay, so all of a sudden I'm going down and sensing my chest. And all of a sudden I realize I've got these visions of me destroying every building at New York University. And the reason is because they're the bad guys in my mind. They're the bad guys because they're straight analytic philosophers and they're not about math. When I would go to seminars there, but I didn't realize I felt like this.
Right.
So I get in touch with this thing. I see myself flying around like Superman, destroying all the buildings at NYU. I was totally out of touch with that. So that's the point. So we have so many ways of engaging in the world. It's with the person in front of us. But the key for us, and having that person in front of us, like I say, it facilitates this practice of mindfulness. That's the thing. When I'm by myself, it's a lot harder. I do this focusing thing with a person directly for this purpose. He guides me in what we're doing. It's for 15 years, and it's been wonderful. It's harder, but I still can do it. I walk my dog, and I'm more present.
Sure. Well, I think of the old biblical adage of where two or more are gathered in my name, I am present, and this speaks to the access to the divine in relational settings by way of paying attention. Okay, so let's talk about the title of your book is The Politics of Attention and the Promise of Mindfulness. So I think we've actually worked the title backwards. We've spoken a little bit about the promise of mindfulness, right? But why the politics of attention? What maybe just share that concept. What does that concept mean?
Well, democracy. One book I talk about in chapter 8 is attention deficit democracy.
We're all suffering from ADD.
Yeah. And the idea is voting is not enough. We need to participate. We need to be at a minimum very much aware of what's going on. But we need what you do on a massive scale, I think, because our politics are wrecked. Especially in the United States. It's horrific. We're the worst. We have a party actively supporting Russia right now. That they want to pull Ukraine funding. This Trump, his interest lies with Russia. Okay, and they do whatever he wants. It's unbelievable if they can pull that off. So we need what you do on a massive scale. That's what I recommend in chapter 8. And I'm following this idea of Hannah Arendt, who is a world-renowned, she passed away in 1975, but she's extremely famous now because she's an expert on authoritarianism. For one thing, she grew up in Nazi Germany, she escaped. And so she has this idea. Her bottom line is we need council democracy. And she says, whenever we start afresh, she has this wonderful book called On Revolution. Whenever we
what was the word you had before democracy there? I didn't quite hear it. We need what democracy?
Council democracy.
Council democracy. Okay. What does that mean?
Well, it's citizen councils. That's okay. What I was starting to explain. That during these revolutionary periods, what happens is citizens rule. Because you get rid of the old government and you're like, oh, what do we do now? And you start something afresh. So what happens is in all these revolutions, the French Revolution, the Russian Revolution, and in America, you had something similar that Tocqueville loved about America. But the idea is that people form these councils and they govern from there. And it's the people. And Tocqueville imagined this process where you had a lot of local groups that were networked and who sent representatives to higher levels. And then eventually you have people talking directly to heads of governments, or even, we're not overthrowing any governments around here, but there's a lot of work like this, like this guy Fishkin out in Stanford. You must know about his work. So that you have these citizen groups that are advisory. They're just randomly chosen citizens that are very effective. Yeah, but we need to ramp this up in a hurry.
So I think there's like, I too am a fan of Tocqueville's notion, and I'm also mindful of the fact that at the time of the American Revolution, the average population of the state was 109,000. So these structures were built for a lot smaller groups, and what's the number? Is it 60 or is it 100,000 people that constitute a community you can actually get your arms around, and that can get its arms around you? And I also believe that there are all kinds of micro democracies all over the place. We have economic structures like cooperatives. We have concepts like land trusts. We have the practice of the commons. We have employee-owned and directed firms. I think I said cooperatives, civil society organizations. Many small nonprofits in our communities are actually member-based organizations that democratically elect people to their boards, and those boards are supposed to have the authority to direct the hired hands, the staff, and the executive, directly through an executive director or a CEO. So we have these mini democracies. We have these structures all over the place, and most of the ones I've seen don't function particularly well. So the approach to the structures we have, I think, is a little bit tepid. It's a bit pallid. It's a bit soft and a bit weak. And part of me thinks that one of the reasons for that is that we haven't those become intellectual and political exercises absent of the kind of attention to one another you're talking about.
Exactly.
So to some degree, I think we have the structures that are just waiting to be indwelt by a different kind of spirit. You could, take it from what you're saying. We're actually arguing that the divine spark is the thing that if we can cultivate that between us, then my notion is that we have all kinds of democratic structures waiting to be filled up by that new body of deeply democratic and relational form. How does that strike you?
Absolutely. It's very challenging. That's why I know that to really do this, which, if we didn't have a world crisis, then this would be a ridiculous exercise. But we need a deep-pocketed person to put together, I'm talking hundreds of millions of dollars, an administration to put these people all together, to get people with training in mindfulness and replicate all kinds of tons of them, to get them out there. That's what we need, and we need somebody to step up. Because I think everybody's aware of how perilous our situation.
Well, I also wonder, Larry, if it's just that, like you said, when you speak of, we need to see the kind of things that I'm doing, and there are others doing it, similar. approaches, these small groups in relational presencing. And I've got to shout out to, I've got to give credit where credit's due. That phrase, I first learned it from Thomas Hubel, who is doing wonderful work with collective trauma healing and relational presencing, and in terms of intimate relationships, familial relationships. Like he's built a sensibility about that practice, which is, I've watched the man heal people simply by the way he pays attention. So this capacity, I think, is there. We have the tools, and at Cultivating Community, we've seen 350 people. There's no reason why I don't think we couldn't bring those practices into the communities that every one of those people resides. Like, we can do something even in the absence of someone who shows up with all the resources to make it happen.
Yeah, I mean, that's a real challenge because, and typically when you're talking about a small business or some kind of thing like that, people are really just focused on that, and they're not necessarily going to want to go see the benefit of going beyond that. But we need this moral, we need this bonding to take place.
Yes.
And talk about anxieties. There's so much anxiety out there with the trouble. So any kind, that has to be the beginning to try to do.
Agreed. Because with that anxiety, we become super absent, don't we? And distracted and dissociative. So that access to the divine, which, arguably, we also lose access to collaborative wisdom if we're not settled and attentive to one another and what arises between and amongst us.
Yeah, so you're talking about there's so much work going on with respect to healing trauma. That's where a lot of this mindfulness is taking place.
Sure, yeah.
Yeah, so we need to we have to recognize that's what we need to bond and heal. And of course, the healing takes place, when I'm hurt. I mean, a lot of it is loneliness. We're just sharing.
Well, I've been wondering if there's healing and there's holing. And I don't really know if one is a precondition to the other. I think if we become more whole, healing can be a byproduct. So I'm not really sure what the relationship between those two notions is, but it seems to me that a generative channel for attention is very much around wholeness. Like if we are attentive to one another, we pay attention, wholeness will come from that, and that will create healing.
Yeah, I mean, that was the idea I brought up earlier. That attention actually can unify us, and with more present, but being more present, we become less dissociated. And but it's a hard question. You raised the problem, something that I think you're right, but I don't have the answer right away. The relationship between healing, but I thought this thing, we need wonderful people like Thomas Hubel. I know I'm aware of his work, and yeah, we need a lot.
Another writer that comes to mind who also moves in academic circles is Hartmut Rosa and his work on resonance. I mean, that book was a tome, but some of and just for folks who are finding this concept of resonance interesting, resonance to me for me is a sense of having encountered the other in a powerful way, and develops a response in your personhood somewhere, and is very often accompanied by tears, laughter, or tingles. So in a very large book, that's some of the really very practical stuff that arises. So you said you didn't have an answer to that last question, Larry. Maybe that's okay, but I was just thinking that before you said that we had just actually solved all of the world's problems.
That was easy.
Right?
Just find somebody with $1 billion and get this thing together.
Right.
Why did it take us this long? Figure that out.
Right. Well, I'm thinking that every single one of us has the capacity to pay attention to ourselves and to one another. And to me, that is a step that I can take the moment I walk out this door, that will positively affect the world in the direction that I would like to affect it. So there's something that we can do in lieu of someone riding in on a white horse. Hey, all right. So we've got to close. We got 4 minutes. Maybe we can just sit with for a second. What meaning, if any, has been made for us, or what has struck us about our conversation so far?
Yeah, well, it's great to talk to you, and more. Of course, I get to hear so much during the meetings. I've been a little bit distracted lately, so I haven't been showing up as much as I usually have. But it's just I appreciate, and we're on the same page, obviously. With somewhat different sources we listen to. I just feel that this work we're doing is beyond important. We just got to get the word out, and I'm working for you. That's how I feel that this is a cause that couldn't be more important. I don't see any other way. I mean, they say science is going to come up with some solutions to the energy thing, but if we're lucky, it'll happen in 10 years. And in the meantime, everything's set in stone right now, so it's going to be a very rough ride going forward. And hopefully there'll be tone things down, but we have to take control of our politics. That's the thing. The people have to not be sucked in and fooled by these monsters out there who promise the world and give us crap. These are crimes against humanity with the point. These people know about it, but it doesn't matter. We have to take it back.
Yes.
And that's what this is about. We've got to get together and talk through the issues. I want to talk through the issues, even though I have a friend I deeply respect. We differ, but at least we respect each other in our difference. But otherwise it's poisonous. People can't talk politics with a family member now, especially with this new war. This is creating a whole new other divide. No, I mean, we have to talk it out. And Michelle Goldberg just had an article in the Times about canceling some people who've written books about what it's like to be a Palestinian under Israeli. I mean, this is a pretty balanced perspective, and he's getting canceled. We can't do it. We need a solution. We can't just cancel people and go back into our bubbles.
Well, I partly think that the increasing sense of I think we're defaulting to some toxic tribalism. So in search of some coherence or some consistency, it's easy to latch on to an ideology or a cause that we import with all of its language and its coherence. Whereas I think that to some degree is very much like an addiction. We're reaching for something else, and that particular substance isn't going to provide us the answer. Whereas what we're reaching for is what you've spoken about, and that is this bonding, this connection, and this access to the divine, where we feel in relationship with one another. Coherence can come from that rather than from these sickly, thin, toxic alternatives that are grabbing our attention. So,
and the problem is that people just feel they want to be part of a group, they want to be part of something, and it's that need overrides everything. They just don't listen to reason. A lot of times because they don't have the capacity, educated enough.
And these toxic tribes I speak of offer a sense of identity, because it's the sense of identity we're actually looking for. So to be with others in the ways you're describing, to me, is the healthy antidote and the path to whole living that that energy is actually seeking.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Try to get that message. I'll have to write another dozen books.
Well, we could talk longer because you said that the book took you a long time to write. So if it took you a long time to write, it must have been you were wrestling with it, and things that you were wrestling with were very important to you. So maybe we can have another conversation sometime soon, Larry, and explore some more of these possibilities and what's unfolding in your life and work as a result. But thank you very much for this work, and it's wonderful to be in conversation with someone who's thought so deeply about these things and has taken the effort to put it down on paper so that it can be shared and spread with others and through the world. So thank you very much, Larry, for everything you're doing, for taking time to spend time with me. All right. With that, we will call our time together closed. We will gather again at the same time next week. That is every Thursday at 2 o'clock ET or 7 p.m. in the UK. In the meantime, you can subscribe below or find us on axiomnews.com, on Facebook, or on X. Thank you for listening. I'm your host, Peter Pula.